Hi, everyone. Today we are going to talk about how conflict lives inside of a story. So stick around, and I'm prepping for my webinar that's happening this Friday. It's going to be on conversational cocktails, which is a program I designed. And if we haven't met, I'm Cheryl Piper, Ascended Unity, CherylPiper.com. And, today hi, Deb, how are you? Glad you could join. And today we're going to be talking and kind of extending that story from last week where we're talking about conversations. So just give me some likes, give me some wows, let me know you're out there. Comment in the box, that always helps. Say hi. I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping here, and then we can get started. We're going to talk for maybe 15 minutes today. It's not going to be super long. I like to keep these short and, give you some information. Hopefully you can join me with the webinar on Friday. It's going to be Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Hi, Lisa. Glad you joined. Nice to see you. Just doing a little bit of housekeeping here, and then I will be starting out. So, like I said, love the wows, love the likes. Do some comments wherever you're from. That's always great too. And just need to share this over, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so as I said, today we're going to be talking about how conflict lives inside of a story. So what we talked about last week, we were talking about conversational blind spots, as far as things like, I'm in the conversation, so I really do know what's going on, or doesn't everybody think like me? So those were some of the things we talked about last week, and just wanted to move forward and talk about a few more things that are going to be in the webinar on Friday, but just kind of wanted to give you a preview. So I thought today, let's talk about how conflict lives inside of a story. So a lot of times what happens when we're in a conversation with someone, and maybe we don't get the whole story, or maybe we are interpreting what our opinion of the story is, because as we talked about last week, and we'll talk about this a lot in the webinar, we really do see things from our perception. And so whatever that perception is, that creates our reality. And that's the lens in which we view things from. That's the lens we make decisions from. That's the lens when we're having a conversation with someone. That's how we're perceiving the words that they're saying. And as I mentioned last week, the how do I want to say this? What's the word I want to use? Really, the understanding of a conversation isn't in the person who's speaking, it's in the person who's listening, because they are listening and bringing it through their filter. And so therefore, however they're coming to the table is that filter that they're listening to your words from. And the same with you. That's the filter that you're listening from when you're listening to someone who's talking in a conversation. So there's a term, and I'm going to talk about it more in the webinar, but it's called double clicking. And so when you think about, let's just think, like with our mouse on our computer. And so when someone makes a statement, instead of just drawing a conclusion, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about today, the ladder of conclusions. So instead of just walking up that ladder of creating a story, because that's what we do. If we don't have all the information, our brain just kind of fills in the blanks. Because when we're having a conversation with someone, we have, hi, Joe and Trudy, glad you guys joined. Give me some likes and wows. Love those wows. Those are always fun. So anyway, so when we're in a conversation and um, we're having a reaction to that. Remember, well, I don't know if everybody was on last week or not, but we talked a bit about the brain, and we are going to talk about some neuroscience in the webinar on Friday, but because it's really about what's going on in the brain that creates these conclusions that we come to, and hence the name Conversational Cocktails, because that's what's happening in our brain when we're having a conversation. We're actually creating this neurochemical cocktail. And whether that is in a situation of trust, of, wow, I'm just having such a great time talking with this person, we're really connecting, and we just have all this energy going, and I just feel like all these ideas are coming to me. Those are really positive neurochemicals that are kind of stirring up in you and creating that conversation. And on the other side of that spectrum, if we get into a conversation with someone that we're maybe feeling like, I don't really think I can trust this person, there's something going on here that is just not feeling right, and I feel this sense of distrust. And so that's another set of neurochemicals that our brain is releasing into our system to view that conversation. And the area of the brain is called the amygdala. And I call that an amygdala hijack whenever that situation happens, because you're really getting hijacked. That amygdala in our brain, that's the primitive part of the brain. That's the area that always is scanning for threats. Scan, scan, scan. That's all it does. Is there a threat? Is there a threat? I have to protect. I have to protect. When it senses a threat, it immediately reacts to that by kind of pulling in your level of sight and shutting down that area of the brain where we can co-create with people, where we can be in that wonderful space, because it's in a protect mode. It's kind of like that, well, it creates that fight, flight, freeze, appease. That's the situation that's going on. And you're going to do one of those things when you're in that situation. Oh, hi, Kim. Thanks for joining. And when that happens, I mean, this is the job of the brain. It's like the saber-toothed tiger is chasing us. Oh, we have to get away because we have to survive. And so therefore it goes into that threat mode. Well, that part of the brain is still active, and it is still scanning for threats. So coming back to the ladder of conclusions, which is, kind of what we're talking about today, is when we're in a conversation with someone and we think we know what's going on, and we haven't really double clicked into the situation. And what that means is, just think about it like with your computer. When you're double clicking on a folder, you're just going down a level. You're opening up more information, and you're opening up more information if you double click on it again. And so when someone makes a statement in a conversation, and we kind of think what they're talking about, but maybe we don't really know. But instead of doing that double clicking and saying, well, wait a minute, is this what you're saying? Because that's what I'm hearing. Is that what you mean? Instead of doing that, we kind of walk up this ladder of conclusions, because we have a reaction, we have a feeling about what's happening in that conversation. And then that feeling, whether that's a good feeling or a bad feeling, creates us kind of stepping up through this ladder of conclusions where we create a story, because our brain doesn't like blanks. It'll fill in the blanks, and then we're creating a story, and we think we know what's going on because our brain kind of put that conclusion together in our mind and created that conflict inside the story, created that drama inside the story, all of those things that maybe weren't even happening. And I spoke about this a little bit last week too, where you could be in a conversation with someone and the two of you kind of part, and you can hear maybe them talking about it with someone else later, and the story comes back to you, and you're like, wow, that's not the conversation that I was in, And so when these things happen, that lets us know that we're kind of walking up that ladder of conclusions, or maybe that person walked up the ladder of conclusions. And so super important in that area of communication and conversation to be able to double click on those situations when they're happening, when we're in a conversation, and asking those questions that kind of dig a little bit deeper into what's really happening here, so that we really are understanding what's the subject of the conversation, or what that person is actually trying to get across to us. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is just in stepping up that ladder of conclusions, we can convince ourselves that a story is correct, when in fact it's not what happened at all. And this is why, I think there's I don't know the statistic actually, but there's some statistic that eyewitnesses are like kind of the worst for a crime or a situation, because people view what's going on from their lens of perception. And it may seem completely different than what's actually going on because of where they're coming from. So like if I had a really bad morning and I stubbed my toe when I got out of bed, and oh my goodness, the toothpaste didn't come out right, or it came out everywhere. And it's just like my momentum that has gotten behind my day has all been kind of a little bit negative and taken me down that path. And then I am in a situation where I'm having a conversation with someone that is contributing to my view of the conversation. That's contributing to how I'm perceiving that conversation to happen. And we all know this. We've been in these situations where, you're just not really in a great mood. And then all of a sudden you're in a conversation and things go really sour, and you're like, wow, how did that happen? And, and not realizing that perhaps we contributed to that. And that other person, perhaps when we said something, they had that amygdala hijack where they immediately felt threatened. And so therefore they just kind of pull back, and they're either going to do what? One of those four things. It's going to be fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Depending on the situation, they're going to do one of those four things. But they're actually viewing the conversation now through a different lens, because their view has been narrowed because their brain has perceived a threat and wants to protect them. And so now their guard's up. And so you can't really have a conversation with someone in that state of mind, whether it's you, them, or both of you, that's actually going to have a good outcome or a productive conclusion, or where you're creating new ideas or inspired thought, or, inspirational thought, using your imagination. None of that is present when that's what's going on in a conversation. When people are in that space, they're not able to co-create. They're not able, oh, hi, thanks, David. They're not able to be in that space of inspired thought. And so keep that in mind when you're, walking around today and talking with people, and, do some double clicking when you're in a conversation with someone. And if you really don't understand what's going on, or maybe think you understand, but, check on that and see, and just double click and go a level deeper with asking them to explain, asking them to talk about that a little bit more. Like, what does that mean? And see the difference in the conversations that you're having. Recognize also when you do get hijacked, when your amygdala gets hijacked. That's another thing that we're going to be talking about, is how to recognize that and how to pull yourself back from that level of thought back to inspired thought, opening up that prefrontal cortex and being able to have those type of conversations that are co-creating with people. So we're going to be chatting about that. I think Well, this is about the time. It's about 15 minutes. So I am going to say goodbye, but also invite you. I'm going to put a link on this post that will go into CherylPiper.com so that you guys can register for Conversational Cocktails. Again, that's happening this Friday, February the 2nd at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And it's happening on Zoom. So if you have Zoom, easy for you to get in. You'll get an email that has the registration. All you have to do is click on it. If you don't have Zoom, just download it so that you're ready. And I look forward to having you guys register and come and join me for Conversational Cocktails. I will be back live on Facebook Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And we'll talk about some more things with conversation and kind of what's going on with the brain in determining how those conversations are going to turn out. So again, I'm Cheryl Piper. You can reach me at CherylPiper.com. You can reach me at AlchemyHolisticLifeCoach.com. And you can always find me here on Facebook at Cheryl Piper Sends Love. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. It was so much fun. I enjoy doing this. This is my mission, to kind of put that love out there and help people with whatever situations are going on in their life to learn to let go of the past and make decisions from your present moment rather than making decisions from past painful things that have happened. Take care. Thanks again.